Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here. Um, so yes, there is my email address, and then call me crazy, but there's my cell phone number too. So you can give me a call or text. I know people like to text these days. My kids, they never call me; they just text me. But if you get a picture, if you get weeds or diseases or some kind of lawn problem, send me a text message. Tell me who you are, tell me where you live, just so I have a little bit of background there, because I get text messages from people in Florida. And that's a totally different answer when you're dealing with that. So tell me where you are, who you are, what your problem is, and I'll try to answer things by pictures through text, or you can email me. Uh, and if you're a Twitter person, you can follow me on Twitter too. Although I don't tweet very much, but you can follow me that way. I just want to remind you that there's some other good webinars coming up. So next week, Allison's going to be talking about summer flowering bulbs. And I think I'm going to be her co-pilot on that one. So, but lots of cool webinars coming up, and interesting topics, animals in the yard and those kind of things, vegetable container gardening. So lots of cool stuff coming up. So look forward to those upcoming webinars. Okay, something I always like to talk about to start is some of the benefits of lawns. And although I'm preaching to the choir here, because you're here intentionally to hear about lawns, but lawns have some benefits I think people don't think about. Obviously they're nice to look at and they're kind of nice to play on and that type of thing. But lawns can provide us exercise. They can be a landscaping element. Lawns from an environmental perspective, they filter water. They prevent soil erosion. They actually store carbon. So we've all heard about concerns about elevated carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere. Well, lawns, by virtue of this stuff that they produce, now we call this thatch, but all the roots and stuff that they produce every year, those roots become organic matter, and that stores carbon in the soil. So lawns are very good at what we call sequestering or storing carbon. And then, just taking care of a lawn it can be really good exercise. It could be great mental exercise. It can be good physical exercise. So is a part of your landscapes. Don't disregard some of these benefits that lawns can provide to you personally and to your neighbors and to society as a whole. Okay, what does it take to have a nice lawn in Colorado? We're really in a really good place to be able to have nice lawns. Now I hope I don't make anyone feel bad if you say, well, my lawn's terrible, or maybe that's why you're on this call or this webinar. But it is really a pretty good place from an environmental perspective to have a lawn, mainly because humidity is so low and we can control how much water goes on our lawns. So parts of the country where it's humid and where it rains a lot, we can have all kinds of cruddy turf diseases. We have more insect pests. There are more weed problems where you really can't control the amount of moisture that goes on that lawn. So that ability to really very closely control how much water we put on our lawns, low humidity, it really dramatically reduces the number of true disease problems and insect problems. Everybody's going to have weeds wherever you have turf, wherever you have a lawn in the world. You're going to have potentially weed problems there. But we are in a very good place. And if you like to do organic lawn care, this is probably one of the best spots in the world to be able to successfully do organic lawn care and not have to really rely on pesticides to manage pests, because we just have fewer of them. So what does it take to have a good lawn? In my mind, it's just taking care of those routine lawn management practices of how to mow and irrigate and fertilize properly and manage thatch and soil compaction, those type of things. So That's what we're going to concentrate on today. We're not going to talk a lot about pest control, or very little actually, because if you do all this other stuff correctly, you're probably not going to have much in the way of pest problems. When we do have problems in lawns in Colorado, usually it's something's just a little bit off in the mowing or the way we fertilize. Certainly irrigation problems are by far the most common cause of lawn problems here in Colorado. Maybe too much thatch. So again, here's a very thatchy lawn. You can see that layer of organic matter that's on the soil surface, and that can dry out real quickly. And so if you have an extremely thatchy lawn, which is usually meaning it's going to be a fairly old lawn, you may have to water that lawn more frequently than if you didn't have a thatch layer. But we'll talk about thatch in a little while. Most likely, though, when you have problem areas in your lawn, it's oftentimes an irrigation coverage problem. So that's why I tell people it's almost always water. So frequently when we go onto lawns, and I visit a lot of lawns with Allison because I'm up here in Larimer County, and so she does a lot of lawn visits. It's almost always water in either directly because you got horrible sprinkler coverage or heads that are too low or not turning or not coming up, or people are watering too much or not enough. So quite often, even the weed problems we find in people's lawns, we can link them to how they're watering those lawns. Certainly, our most common disease problems are irrigation related too. So many of our problems can be attributed to water. So that's why I'm going to spend maybe a little more time on water and irrigation than I will on mowing or fertility, because so many problems are irrigation related. From a mowing perspective, mow your lawn as tall as you can tolerate. And I know everybody wants that golf course fairway look on their lawns, and that does look cool, but that means you're going to have a shallower root system. It's going to be more difficult to irrigate. You're going to have more potential for disease. You're going to have more weed problems. So the shorter you mow your grass, the greater the potential for turf problems, and the less stress tolerant that lawn's going to be. So 3 inches is better than 2, 4 inches is better than 3. The taller you can set that mower, the healthier it is for the grass. So, and then you're going to get a whole lot of other benefits. You're going to have fewer weeds. You don't have to mow as frequently when you're mowing taller. You're going to have better traffic tolerance. So if you have kids and dogs, it takes more kid and dog traffic to wear out a lawn that's mowed tall than one that's mowed short. From a weed perspective, you're going to have fewer weeds. So here's a picture of a research project I did many years ago, probably 25 years ago. And that shorter cut grass, everything's the same in this picture. The grass species is the same, water, fertility, everything's identical except the mowing height. And you can see where that shorter mowing height was used. There are way more weeds compared to the taller grass on the left. So taller grass is really one of your best weed control products, and it's free too. So mow that grass as tall as you can tolerate, and then mow it frequently. And if you like to mow your lawn, I know Allison loves mowing her lawn. My dad, he would mow his lawn every other day, and people say, well, isn't that too frequent? It's like, it really isn't. You can't hurt your lawn by mowing it too frequently. But you can hurt it by not mowing it frequently enough. And that's especially true in the spring. Our lawns are just waking up now here in Fort Collins. Some of them are, showing a lot of green, some just a little bit of green. But once they start growing, and I think everybody kind of knows this, that, the mowing can get a little out of control in the spring. And that's especially true if you get a little frisky with your fertilizer. But if you can mow your lawn every 5 days during the spring, then once it gets hot, the lawn slows down just like we do. It doesn't like the heat, doesn't like growing as much. You can go to once a week when it's really hot. But when it's cool and we get wet periods, mow your lawn every 5 days. That's just going to be healthier for the grass. You won't see the clippings. Your mower's going to work better. It's just healthier for the grass to mow it a little more frequently in the spring if you're able to. Leave those grass clippings in the lawn as free fertilizers, free organic matter. Everyone says, how do I get more organic matter in the soil? leave your grass clippings on your lawn. That's one easy way to get more organic matter into your turf system. And you don't have to fertilize your lawn as much if you leave those clippings on the lawn. Now, I know some of you like to use them for making compost. That is great. If you want to use them in your vegetable garden for mulch, grass clippings are a perfect mulch for a vegetable garden. So if you're using it for that purpose, that's fine. Just realize that if you're consistently, always removing those clippings from the lawn, that you're going to have to fertilize more, because when you take the clippings off, you're harvesting nutrients out of that turf system. So if you can, leave them on. If you remove them, realize you have to fertilize a little bit more, maybe one time more during the growing season. Keep your mower blade sharp. And I know it's a hassle to sharpen your mower blade. If you're not mechanically inclined, it's intimidating. It really isn't that hard. But get 2 mower blades. Here's a trick. Get 2 of them. If you can figure out how to just get that blade off, then you can take it to a lot of the garden centers. We'll have people that on Saturdays are sharpening mower blades. Or some of the hardware stores will do this as a service. They'll have somebody come in. So just have 2 blades and put the sharp one on, take the other one off, take it to somebody who can do it. If you're a handier person, you can do this in your own home workshop. But keep those mower blades sharp. If you do it once or twice a year for a bluegrass lawn, that's enough. If you have a tall fescue lawn, you might want to do it maybe once a month. And I'll give you a little hint here. People that do commercial mowing, the professional ones, not the kid you hired down the block, but people that have mowing services, generally they're putting sharpened blades on their mowers at least every day or every other day. So they do it very frequently because it does dull that blade. Something else about mowing. Don't mow when your lawn obviously needs to be watered. You're looking at that lawn, you say, wow, it's turning funky colors. It looks like it should be watered. Definitely water that lawn and hold off on the mowing and do it the next day. Otherwise, you run the risk of this happening to your lawn. Now, as bad as this looks, the lawn is not dead and it's not really diseased. It's just this lawn was mowed when it was drought stressed, and that's really hard on the leaves, and it turns the leaves brown. And then the plant's got to make a whole bunch of new green leaves to hide all these brown ones that you tortured the plant by mowing it when it was drought stressed. So that can take 2 or 3 weeks to recover. So you don't have to reseed, you don't have to resod. Your mowing company did not bring disease on your lawn if this happens. This is simply the lawn was drought stressed and heat stressed. So, don't mow your lawn when it's 104 and it's 3 in the afternoon and the sun is blazing on the lawn. That's almost welcoming this kind of thing from happening. So mow when it's a little cooler in the morning or later in the evening, and you have less likelihood for this to happen. Okay, lawn fertilization. People make this overly complicated. They get all worried about the numbers on the bag, and are there zeros there, and do I need phosphorus, and does it have to contain iron? Let me tell you this. The important thing about fertilizing lawns in Colorado is that you put nitrogen down. And it doesn't matter if it's organic, it doesn't matter if it's synthetic. It doesn't matter if the first number on the bag is a low number or a high number. What matters is that you're fertilizing and that you follow the instructions on the bag. And then also you do it at the right time of the year. So sometimes people say, well, we should fertilize in the holidays. That's what my grandfather told me, or I read this in the newspaper, something like that. Maybe those can be good reminders. Here's the thing is if you just fertilize based on calendar date, you run the risk of maybe fertilizing at a time when the grass really doesn't like to be fertilized, or putting too much fertilizer on. I always tell people, let your lawn tell you when it needs to be fertilized. Now, I'll give you a little hint here. Soil testing will not give you that answer. So a soil test does not tell you when to fertilize with nitrogen. Soil tests are useless for nitrogen fertilization. Let your lawn tell you when it needs to be fertilized. If it's growing and you're getting clippings when you mow and the color is good, it really doesn't need fertilizer. And just putting more fertilizer on because you saw a commercial on TV telling you to, or you saw your neighbor fertilizing, or you read something in the paper, that doesn't mean that for your lawn, it's the time to fertilize. Let your lawn tell you when it needs to be fertilized. You'll get signals, you'll get symptoms. When you see your neighbor's lawn is beautiful and green and growing, and yours has this color, and you never have to mow, that's a sign it's not growing much. And the nutrient that's important there is the nitrogen. It's not phosphorus, it's not iron, it's not potassium, it's not micronutrients, it's nitrogen. So then find a fertilizer that you like, either because it's organic, because you like their commercials on TV, because it matches up with your fertilizer spreader. The grass plant does not care what kind of fertilizer you use, folks. I know that crushes some of your preconceptions about lawn fertilizing, but if you like doing things organically, we got tons of great organic fertilizers. If you like Scott's Turf Builder, that works fine too. If you like Fertilome, if you like Colorado's Own, it really doesn't matter to the grass plant. It may matter to you. You may have certain preferences or reasons for selecting a brand, but the plants don't care, to be quite honest. So don't overthink it. Just watch the lawn. When it looks like it needs fertilizer, then get your favorite fertilizer, follow the instructions. More is not better. Okay. And I will tell you, though, something that we do know, and Allison and I see this all the time, is more often than not, we see lawn problems because people aren't fertilizing enough. It's much less common to see over-fertilized lawns. Now, using the correct amount of fertilizer can also be a tool for battling weeds in the lawn. So, and this is just weed or plant ecology, weed ecology. If you have a healthy lawn and you have lots and lots of grass plants and they're all happy and healthy and growing and they're all kind of crowded together and competing and taking up space and water and light, that doesn't leave room for the weeds to grow. That's how lawns keep weeds out of themselves, is by being healthy. When you don't fertilize enough, the turf gets wimpy, it gets weak, it gets thin. You can see the soil, and whenever you can see bare soil in a lawn, that is an absolute invitation for weeds to start growing in that opening in the lawn. So I like to tell people, think of lawns like it's a mulch. It's a living mulch. And so in your flower beds, if you don't put enough mulch down, if you see bare soil, or your vegetable garden, you're going to get weeds coming into that bare soil. The same thing happens in lawns. That's where weeds come from. So keep your lawn healthy by mowing tall, keep your lawn healthy by fertilizing appropriately. And it may not necessarily be the 4 applications you see here. So this soil was really hungry. It was very, very, very deficient in nitrogen. So in this case, on this lawn, it took 4 applications to keep the weeds out. And if you only did 2 or certainly none, you can see more weeds. But your lawn, if you have a 30-year-old lawn, it may only need fertilizer once a year, or maybe at the most twice a year. But if you're on a brand new housing addition, horrible soil, you probably have to fertilize your lawn 3 or 4 times a year. So it's kind of the age of the lawn, it's the health of the lawn, it's just how well it's growing. If you want to cookbook it, here's some broad dates, okay? And since we're talking about spring lawn care, I've highlighted the spring one here. So anytime from like now to maybe sometime early June is a good time to fertilize. Now, this is a good time if you like to use organic fertilizers, and I show Rich Lawn is one of our good local ones. Alpha Lawn is another good local lawn fertilizer. Those are great this time of year. They don't release the nitrogen really quickly. They don't cause a hay field to start growing in your lawn. So they're a great option. But if you like Scott's Turf Builder, that's cool too. Scott's Turf Builder is going to work just fine, or Vigoro. Here's the key: follow the instructions. Don't put too much on, especially this time of year. Otherwise, you're going to have to be mowing every 2 or 3 days. Okay. The other thing about fertilizing this time of year is this is also a good time if you want to use a crabgrass preventer. And Alice and I were just talking about this right before we started. We're right at about the right time to put a crabgrass preventer on. So you can get, and this is one type of weed and feed. So weed and feed to prevent crabgrass is one kind of weed and feed. The other kind of weed and feed I'll talk about later is the one for dandelions. Those are two totally different products. So the weed and feed for crabgrass prevention, this is when you put it on right now, okay? Now, a problem with that is when we start getting dandelions in about 2 or 3 weeks and people want to do another weed and feed, then they put another fertilizer with a different herbicide on. So you're putting two types of fertilizers on very close proximity to each other. And that's why sometimes we see their lawns just get out of control. So do only one or the other with the fertilizer, and you can get products that don't have fertilizer on them for weed control. So pay attention to what you're putting on your lawn so you don't over fertilize this time of year. It's a real easy thing to do. But this is okay. This is a perfect time, and we got some rain coming next week. If you want to put crabgrass preventer out and it's on fertilizer, do it. Do that this weekend. It's a perfect time to do it. And since most people don't have their irrigation systems fired up, you're going to get it all nice and watered in. So that's a good deal. You can see as we proceed throughout the year, summer, do nitrogen only if the lawn tells you need it. Don't do it because a Scott's lawn care commercial tells you to, or you see True Green come into your neighbor's lawn fertilizing. Don't use those signals that you should fertilize. But if you feel like you want to, if you're a lawn geek and you just can't resist it, and I know some of you are out there where you're saying, my husband's going to do it. Women are much smarter about lawn care than men are. Men are stubborn, and they think they know everything, and they don't read instructions. I know, but if you insist on fertilizing in July 4th, this is when you use an organic, because it's not going to get things out of control. So if you really want to fertilize this time of year, use an organic. And I show 4 of them here. These are all organic fertilizers. And really, if you're going to only fertilize one time during the year, fall is a much better time. But I know everybody wants to do stuff this time of year, so that's okay. Just don't get out of control with it. And by the way, something I would say, this is a fertilizer schedule for bluegrass and fescue lawns, our cool season lawns. Now, if you're one of the few people that has a buffalo grass lawn or a blue grama lawn, it's okay to put your crabgrass preventer out, but I would discourage you from putting fertilizer out right now. Wait until summer to fertilize your buffalo grass lawn. But if you can't find a crabgrass preventer that's not on fertilizer, it's not the worst thing in the world, but it's really, you're not going to make your buffalo grass green up any sooner by fertilizing it this time of year. It's just going to really help weeds that are growing in that buffalo grass lawn. So really wait until you get into the summer to fertilize your buffalo grass. Again, there's no best fertilizer. The key is read the instructions. And the instructions are going to be on the back of the bag, and those are going to tell you which spreader setting to use. So buy a fertilizer, not really based on how pretty the bag is. Buy a fertilizer based on how good the instructions are on the back, and that they can tell you for your spreader that you have in your garage. It might be a Scott's, or it could be an Ortho, or it could be a Greenview, whatever the brands are. Whatever spreader you use, match it up with a fertilizer that has instructions for your spreader. So do I put it on setting 4, or do I put it on setting 27? You can see this particular brand, it's got all these different spreader types, and it shows what setting to use. And what that setting does is it gets you to apply the correct amount of fertilizer. So follow the instructions. More is not better, like most things in life. Okay, any questions that have come up with mowing and fertility, Al?
There was quite a few on Crabgrass Preventer, which I think you have addressed thoroughly, and I suspect that you are going to cover aeration coming up.
Yep, aeration's coming up.
Okay, then you can continue.
Okay, but before aeration, we're going to talk about water. So water, and as I said earlier, water, improper watering, too much, too little, poor sprinkler coverage, by far is the root cause of so many of our turf problems. So how do you water the correct amount? I'm going to show you this visual. I can send this out to you too. So I can send this and you can print it and hang it on your refrigerator. So I will send this out. If you're in the city of Fort Collins, I created this with the city a number of years ago, and they put it like in their water utility bills, I think, or something. But so this shows three very important aspects of lawn irrigation. So I'll lead you through these. One is, and this one makes sense to people. In the spring, when it's cool, we don't have to fertilize irrigate as much as in July and August when it's hot and sunny and dry. So the number of days, this is for people who really don't want to think about it too much, but they want some guidance. Okay. So I call this the cookbook approach. You know, if you're a good cook or a good baker like Allison or me, we both like to bake. You don't always need a recipe to make something successfully. But if you're just a beginner, you need a cookbook. You need a recipe so that your chocolate chip cookies come out correctly. Okay. And so this is the cookbook for how do you water a lawn. And then as you get better and better at it, you refine it. You say, oh, this is how much vanilla extract to put in, or this is how much whatever, or this is how long to bake these at elevation. So you get better and better the more experience you get at your lawn and its irrigation, at least if you pay attention to what you're doing. Now, some people don't ever want to pay attention, and that's why they have irrigation clocks, and we'll get to those in a second. But so here, when it's cool and maybe rainy and it's, we maybe water once a week, okay? When it's hot and dry and windy and sunny and the humidity is low, it might be 2 or 3 times a week. So that's, we call that seasonal adjusting, and you should do that for your irrigation controller at least. Don't be watering in May like it was set from last August, okay? And then you forgot to change it in October. So August irrigation is not what we do now, all right? So learn that. Learn how to adjust seasonally. Secondly, thing to notice here is in this chart, we talk about 2 different types of sprinkler heads. And really there are 3 types. I'll show you in a second, but there are really 2 main types. One is what we call the pop-up sprays, the one that jump out of the ground. They just spray tons of water. There's no movement. You don't see any turning of the sprinkler head. You don't see any movement of the spray. Those pop-up sprays put a lot of water out in a very, very short amount of time. So they have very short run times. So look at this, 6 minutes, 8 minutes, maybe 9 or 10 minutes when it's really, really hot. And then the other ones, the ones that turn, the ones that go in a circle very slowly, look at the run times in these. We are talking 2 to 3 times as long as the pop-up sprays because it just takes them longer to put the very same amount of water out. So understand what kind of sprinkler head you have in your lawn. So when people call me or they email me, I live in Fort Collins. How many times a day should I water my lawn, or how many times a week should I water my lawn, and how long should they run? I tell them I have no idea until you tell me what kind of sprinkler head you have. I cannot answer that question for anyone until I know that very important, the basic type of information. And then the third thing, we strongly encourage what we call soak cycles. So instead of watering 2 cycles of 6 or 1 cycle of 12 minutes, we say 2 cycles of 6 minutes. Instead of doing 1 cycle of 32 minutes, we say do 2 cycles of 16 minutes. And look at this, when you get in the middle of the summer, we're talking, you might be watering your lawn 40, 45, sometimes 50 minutes, and maybe as long as an hour. Once or twice a week to put a correct amount of water out, but split that run time in half And what you do is you get much better water infiltration. Water follows gravity. And if you put it on too fast, you're going to get puddles, you're going to get water running off into the street. And that's not an efficient way to water. And that's why you end up with dry spots in lawns quite often, is you're putting the water on too fast for the soil to absorb it. So this graphic will show up again, and I will send it out to you. So if you were trying to copy that down, don't worry, we'll send it to you. Learn about your irrigation system. And one of the most important buttons on that system is the off button. If it's raining and you don't have a rain sensor on your clock, turn it off. And turn it back on after we get a rainy period. Don't be one of those people that's watering when it's raining, okay? But the other thing is if you want to really try to save water in your lawn, run it manually. So turn the system on and off instead of just letting it run every other day or every 3 days without you paying attention to how long it's running, how many times a week it's running. Pay attention to the lawn. You say, well, how do I know when the lawn needs to be watered? And this is the beginning of what I call the easy, in quotes. It's not easy because you have to pay attention to something. Lawn watering technique. Look for signs of wilt. It could be signs of discoloration. You get this little kind of blue-green funky color going in the lawn. You see footprints, and those footprints, they stay there for hours. That's a sign that the turf is wilted, that the leaves are wilty. They can't stand up on their own because they don't have enough water in the leaves. That is a sign that you should probably water your lawn that night. Okay. So then you say, well, how much water do I put on? Well, you can go back to the visual. You can go back here and say, okay, I've got rotor heads. It is July. I'm going to do 2 cycles of 20 minutes. That would be beautiful. Or you could do 2 cycles at 25 minutes. You're not unlikely to overwater the lawn because of the technique I'm going to show you. The key is to put as much water on as you can. You're kind of filling the root zone up, but to the point where it's not running off. As soon as you see water moving off the lawn, onto the street, on the sidewalk, into the curb, into your driveway, wherever, or into low spots in your lawn, at the bottom of slopes are really hard to water. So if you have slopey parts of your lawn, you have to soak cycle. Otherwise, you're gonna get dry turf at the top. You're gonna get dead grass. It's just the grass is gonna thin out, and it's because of the water. It's not because of the grass. It's because the water goes downhill and things get too dry on top, and then the lawn thins out. That's what's going to happen on the top of a slope. So the steeper the slopes are, the more you have to soak cycle. You may have to go to 3 soak cycles if you have a very steep slope in your lawn. Okay. But here's the key. Know when to water, put a bunch of water on, soak cycle it in, fill up the root zone, and then turn the system off. And then don't water again. Don't water again until you see the symptoms of wilt. Here's another picture. You can see kind of these areas where the turf doesn't look real bright green. That's a sign. Water that night. Or you see the footprinting, which you would see. If you walked in this area right here, you would see these footprinty things. Okay. And so that's your sign to water again. So if you go through your growing season using that technique, just turning your system on and off, and only turning it on when you see this happening, and then filling up those root system, you may get away with watering every 4 or 5 or 6 days, even in the hottest weather. But if you let the system do it, it might be every other day, or every 2 days, or something like that. And so you might water more frequently than you need to. By using this technique and going as many days as you can between waterings, you take advantage of the possibility of that random thunderstorm dumping a bunch of water on your lawn. And there's nothing more frustrating than you water your lawn, and then 5 hours later we get a dump of rain. You go, oh, I just watered, and now it rains. Okay, so the less frequently you water, the healthier it is for the grass. You get less disease, that type of thing. So fewer weeds. but you don't want to push it too far. So don't let the lawn get like making crunchy sounds when you walk on it. That's too infrequently. So there's a fine line there. So that's what I call the smart watering technique. But otherwise, set it to water every 3 days. That's okay. But seasonally adjust so that you're not watering in May the way you would normally water in July or August. Okay.
Hey, Tony.
Yeah.
Can you just review again the difference between pop-up sprays and rotors and then sprayer stream rotors? Could you just quickly cover those?
We're going to get to that. That's coming up next.
Perfect.
Yep. Coming up next, right after this slide. Yeah. So some other things about watering. Water at night. Between 9 at night and 9 in the morning is an easy way to remember. The best time is probably really 2, 3, 4, 5 in the morning, to be honest with you. If you can set your controller to do that, you get better water pressure, less wind. Only downside of that is if you've got a bad head, one that's not popping up, you may not see it. So every once in a while during the growing season, just turn your irrigation system on and watch the heads. But especially if you start seeing very green areas, and there's a sprinkler head in the middle of that green area, that is a sign there's something's not right with your irrigation system, or you're not applying enough water frequently enough. So look for bad heads, and that's harder to do when you're watering at 2, 3, or 4 in the morning, unless you're an insomniac and you're out in your lawn with a headlamp on. So check for sprinkler problems. Check for heads that come up crooked. And so this lawn, this was not because they weren't watering enough. This was because every stinking head in that lawn came up crooked. This happens over the winter. They just shift. They get stepped on when you're mowing. Things happen to sprinkler heads. They get broken. They get plugged. They get too low. There's so many things that can go wrong with an irrigation system. But people see irrigation systems as maintenance-free. They are not. You should be checking that system constantly. And just because, here's a little hint, and this is going to probably insult your irrigation guy, okay, or gal, whoever comes to turn your irrigation system on in the spring, they're going to come on, they're going to turn all those valves correctly in your pressure, breaker, your backflow preventer, and turn the water on, and they'll go through station by station, and you're paying them, $100 to do this. And they say, hey, everything's good to go. You're great for the rest of the year. That is not an irrigation system checkup. To do that properly, you should turn that's each station on and stand there and watch it for like 5 or 10 minutes. Honestly, folks, if they're not doing that, they're not really doing a spring irrigation tune-up. Okay. And what most of them do is they stand there and they kind of scan across the lawn. They say, oh yeah, look at them. They all came up. And there's water coming out of all of them. That doesn't guarantee that you've got a good operating system. So turn it on this time of year. You can do this now. Once you get your irrigation system fired up, just watch it. Make sure the heads are turning fully. Make sure they come up perfectly straight, absolutely perfectly, not just a little bit, perfectly vertical. And that you're getting head-to-head coverage, that the spray is hitting the next head over and that type of thing. So look for those type of things. This is how we promise, or we prove to people that this is an irrigation problem, because a lot of times this happens right next by a head, and you say, it's impossible. Look at all that water coming out of that head. It can't be water. And I hear this over and over. It can't be water. And so this is what we do to people. We put some containers out, we put some on the green spots, we put some on the brown spots, and we show them, and then we run the system for like 10 minutes. And yes, visually it looks fine, but it is not fine. All is not fine there. So when we run the system, you'll get differences in the amount of water. They don't have to be fancy containers. They could be yogurt containers. They could be mason jars. They could be beer cups, cat food cans. There's all kinds of things you can put out there. Just put some containers out, run your system, and then measure how much water. Just stick a ruler in there. And in this case, we had 1/10 of an inch difference. Now you say, well, that's 1/10 of an inch. That's hardly anything. The other way to look at it, twice as much water going here as here. That explains why it's green here and it's not green here, because over an entire growing season, you may get 20 inches of water going here and only 10 inches here. And that's only 4 or 5 feet apart. That explains why people have dead spots. So I know you say your system is perfect or you paid a lot of money for it. The perfect irrigation system hasn't been installed or designed in the history of mankind. None of them are perfect. Rainfall isn't perfect, folks. Okay, so here's the visual. And again, this is where I want to talk about what Allison just asked about, is difference between these types of heads. So the types of heads make a huge, enormous difference in how long you run your irrigation system. The pop-up sprays, the ones that just come out of the ground, they don't turn. There's no motion. There's no movement. Just lots and lots of water come out. These have very short run times. You may only run these for like 10 minutes this time of year. And that would be 2 5-minute soak cycles. Really short amount of time. Now you might run them for 20 minutes in June or July, or maybe even 25, 2 10 or 12-minute run times. Very short run times because they're putting a lot of water out. These types, the rotors, or the ones we call the stream rotors, the ones with the fingers of water that look like dancing water, those types of heads, they need to run much longer period of time, 2 to 3 times longer than the pop-up sprays. Okay, so know what type of head you have. These types, the rotors and stream rotors, are really good for our soils because they put the water out so slowly that it has a chance to run, infiltrate, soak into the soil. Pop-up sprays, not so good for our soils because that's where we get runoff and into the street and those kind of things. So understand your sprinkler type. Here's a little clue though. If you want to change from pop-up sprays, which is kind of they're not necessarily cheap to install, but these are cheaper heads, if you will. You can unscrew the top of these and replace it with a similar arc stream rotor. Just, if you have Rainbird pop-ups, go and get the Rainbird stream rotors. If you have Toro pop-ups, Toro has a stream rotor. Same thing for Hunter. Replace it with the same type of brand, but you can change a mediocre irrigation system that has all pop-up sprays to a really good irrigation system that has stream rotors. And the nice thing is your water provider will often give you a rebate on this exchange because they know that these are much more efficient irrigation heads. So that's something you can do in the spring. People look for things to do in the spring. This is a time of year you can do that type of thing. Some other things to make water or irrigation more efficient is consider getting a smart controller. Here's a great one, the Rachio, made here in Colorado. It's expensive, but this is a smart controller. It goes out and gets weather information and it turns your system on and off. So if you want to have a thought-free, kind of a worry-free irrigation system, this is one that's cool. And if you're a gadget geek, you can run this thing with your phone. You can have Alexa interface with it, and you can figure that out. You're a better person than I am. But in any case, these are really cool irrigation systems. You can get soil moisture sensors to run your system, and you can get these right now. You can go to Home Depot, Lowe's, Ace Hardware, get them on Amazon, and they can turn your system on and off based on the soil moisture level in your lawn. And I think this is probably the best way if you really want to save water to run an irrigation system. But you can install these on your own. There's great YouTube videos on how to do this, how to wire them, where to stick them in the lawn. And then you can fine tune the irrigation. If they're not watering enough, you just adjust up. If they're watering too much, adjust down. But this is another way to do it without thinking. Okay. But none of these technologies will work if you have horrible spacing, horrible pressure, plugged heads, low heads, crooked heads. You have to fix this stuff first before you get the smart controller. Okay. Here's another nice technique to save water. Reduce your run times by just 1 or 2 minutes. That doesn't sound like much, but that can save you 5 or 10% water by simply doing that. And then if your lawn starts, reacting badly to that, and it gets a little too brown, then bump it back up by a minute. See how far you can turn each run time out just by a minute. And over an entire growing season, that will save you an incredible amount of money. Doesn't sound like much, but it can translate to a lot of water being saved. Okay. Any irrigation questions I should address, Al, or should we forge on to thatch?
Forge on.
Okay, thatch. This stuff doesn't form in all lawns. If you have a lumpy lawn, one that's got a lot of nightcrawler activity, you won't have thatch. But if you've got a fairly old lawn, you don't have night crawlers, you might get this stuff called thatch. Or if you irrigate way, way, way too frequently, if you're an everyday irrigation kind of person, you'll get this stuff. And this is a layer of organic matter that forms on the soil surface. The lawn starts to root and grow in the thatch layer. It's not growing in the thatch or in the soil. So you have to water this little tiny root zone, and that's where you end up having to water a lawn every day because it gets stressed since it's just growing here. You want your roots growing here in the soil. As bad as you think our soil is, it's better for the roots to be growing there than in the thatch layer because the soil holds water and holds nutrients and that type of thing. So bluegrass lawns are prone to thatch. Bermuda grass, zoysia. Not many people have those around here, but most people have bluegrass, and bluegrass can be prone to thatch. So how do we manage thatch? One way to do it, and you'll see people do this in the spring, is power raking or dethatching. This can be very effective. I would do this now, like today, if you're going to do it. You want to do this before your lawn comes out of dormancy. If you wait for your lawn to green up, it's probably too late to do a good job dethatching or power raking because you can't get the stuff out of the lawn. This can be incredibly effective in the long run. In the short run, though, it looks very damaging. It tears the lawn up, and you are pretty much guaranteed to have crabgrass. So if you do this first, and then put your crabgrass preventer on afterwards, because this will stir up crabgrass seed, and it's almost a guarantee for a good crop of crabgrass. But you don't have to use power raking as a thatch management tool. One reason that we get thatch in lawns is that the soil often is so compacted the roots don't want to grow into it, so they grow on top of the soil. Roots can be lazy, and they'll grow on top of very compacted soil. Power raking doesn't fix that soil compaction problem. So what I would tell you, if you power rake your lawn, you should still aerate your lawn. And so lawn aeration does a number of things. Number one, it helps to reduce compaction in the lawn. It provides places for roots to grow. So those aeration holes that are created by your aerator, it's a place for roots to grow. But then when you bring the soil up, and this is the thing, this is the key, you want plugs. You want soil on the surface. If this thing is just making holes, you'll still get root growth, but you don't get the plugs coming up. And what the plugs do is that soil falls apart. It falls down on top of the thatch and helps to decompose that thatch. So power raking, you don't get this rooting benefit from power raking. You do remove some of the thatch, but you don't benefit the soil with power raking. So that's why if you do want a power rake, still aerate your lawn. Don't fall for the liquid lawn aeration. So lawn care companies are promoting this. And in fact, there are people I know, and they probably wouldn't call me a friend after I say this, but this stuff does not work, folks. Take my word for it. If you want to believe you're a lawn care person and buy into it, and you don't like there's aerator plugs, I understand you don't like those plugs. But this stuff does not work. It does not. Even though it's sold and your lawn care person will tell you it works, I'm telling you it doesn't. When one comes along that does work, and there is research being done on some of these that might work someday, I will be the very first person to tell you. Here's the thing, as an extension, we have nothing to sell you. I'm not trying to sell you liquid lawn aerator, but your lawn care company might be, and they're going to charge you money for it. This stuff does not work, no matter what they say. So that's all I'm going to say about it. Let's talk about weeds real quickly. Let's see, we have about 7 minutes left. We can do this. So why do we get weeds in lawns? We get weeds because the lawn gets torn up. We get bare soil. It's not fertilized enough. It gets a lot of traffic. You don't water properly. You overwater. You underwater. Here's the thing: you mow, fertilize, water properly, you're going to really minimize your weed problems. Okay. So here's two lawns. The one on the right, mowed taller, fertilized properly, mowed correctly, or irrigated correctly. This one was overwatered, mowed too short, and not fertilized enough. You can see when you can see weeds on the property line, that tells you one lawn's being managed correctly, the other one not so much. Now you could go in and spray the weeds out. That temporarily takes care of the problem, but that's a Band-Aid fix. You still want to correct whatever the problem is that's encouraging the weeds, or whether it's water, fertility, mowing height, whatever the problem might be. Now let's talk about some of the major weed groups that we have in our lawns. We have summer annual grasses. This is where the crabgrass, and this is why you might use a crabgrass preventer this time of year. Not all the things that look like crabgrass in our lawns are crabgrass, and so I show you the four main ones that we get in our lawns, and they look like crabgrass, but they are different. The best prevention is healthy turf. If you've got a really healthy lawn, you really don't need a pre-emergence crabgrass preventer, okay? But if you want cheap insurance, that's okay. Put it out this time of year. Other people want to wait and see. They'll say, okay, I have a healthy lawn. I'm not going to put a crabgrass preventer out, but I might get crabgrass later. There are some things that you can spray afterwards. Just because you see ugly weeds coming up now, or ugly grasses in your lawn, and this is a common one this time of year, this is not crabgrass. Things that look ugly, people call crabgrass, but you're not going to see crabgrass on a lawn now until sometime in June. It is not even thinking of germinating now. So just because it's ugly doesn't mean it's crabgrass. And if you see it this time of year, I guarantee you it's not crabgrass. A crabgrass preventer will not work on an ugly weed you see in your lawn now. These prevent weeds that might be coming up in June and July. So there's all kinds of great crabgrass preventers out there. Again, this is the time of year you want to be putting them on anytime now, and maybe the first week of May, somewhere in there is a good time in Fort Collins. The Scott's ones are good. The ones from Ace, they're all good. Just get them on at the right time, the right rate. Here's the key: you have to water them in. So this is why putting them on now could be really smart, is because we're going to get rain. It's going to water them in, and you don't have your irrigation system turned on yet. So sometimes we see crabgrass preventer fail because people start watering their lawns so late in the spring, they don't get their crabgrass preventer watered in. If you want a phenological, a biological indicator of when to put your crabgrass preventer on, look for when forsythia is blooming in your neighborhood. That's a good phenological indicator of put your crabgrass preventer out. But follow the instructions, put it on at the right rate, and water it in. Now, if you choose not to use the crabgrass preventer and you get crabgrass later in the year, start seeing it in July or August, we've got all kinds of good products, and they all say crabgrass killer on them. And those can be used later in the year. So that would be my inclination if you have a really healthy lawn. Don't use the crabgrass preventer on now. Just wait and see if you get a little bit of crabgrass, and it's easy enough to use these products later on in the year to take care of them. Those really ugly weeds that we see coming up, right now, those will not be prevented by crabgrass preventer. They just won't work. There are a few products that professional lawn care can use to get rid of some of these ugly things that you're seeing now, but most of them you cannot selectively control them. So you're going to have to either get used to them or spray them out with something called Roundup. I had somebody send me an email before this and said they had brome grass, smooth brome grass, and there's no control for brome grass except Roundup. That's the only thing that's going to kill it. And even then, it's going to be with great difficulty. So the message here is, before you go out start spraying stuff, hoping to kill it, get it identified correctly. And that's where you can send me a picture in my text, use my text message to send me a picture and say, what is this? And is there anything I can use to control it? Broadleaf weeds like dandelion, we're going to start seeing dandelion coming up, and plantain and clover if you call the weed. There's all kinds of great products for broadleaf weed control. So many of them. And they all work real well. So we're not going to promote one over the other. The ones that I showed, just a few slides ago, these are all good for dandelions and clover and black medic and plantain and thistle and just about anything. And they control crabgrass. So these broad spectrum products really make weed control in lawns a whole lot easier. Okay. If you don't like using those synthetic ones, there are some quote unquote organic or natural products. So they contain iron. The iron, what it does is it simply burns the leaves of those. And so you have to keep reapplying it. And so this is what happens. You spray it on a dandelion, a few hours later, it looks like that. Literally, folks, it looks like it's killed it in a few hours, but it'll grow back. So you have to do this 2 or 3 or 4 times during the growing season. But then those iron products, they will control those weeds. So that's kind of a natural way to control those. Here's the key, though. Whatever you use, the healthier the weed is, the happier and greener it is, the better any of those weed control products, organic or synthetic, are going to work. And we always encourage spot spraying. Don't broadcast spray anything. The iron products, you couldn't afford to broadcast spray those. They're really expensive. But even just a little Weed Be Gone or whatever products, always spot spray. You're just much less likely to harm things elsewhere in your landscape or your neighbor's landscape. Spot spray those individual weeds. Granular weed and feeds, I don't like to recommend these. They just don't work very well. The ones for dandelions and clover, they just don't work. So spot spray those weeds. This is kind of a lazy approach, and it's not really an effective approach. Okay. Let me jump ahead. I just want to talk about, dogs. We're seeing dog urine problems this time of year. They're really accentuated this time of year because your dog's been going out right outside the patio all winter. There's not a whole lot you can do here, folks, except put a lot of water on there and reseed. Night crawlers, if you have lumpy lawns, there's nothing you can do about these right now except rent a roller and roll your lawn. And what that does is it flattens those bumps from the night crawlers, and they've been doing that all winter. That's the only way to deal with them. There's nothing you can spray for night crawlers. Rabbits. So rabbits, we were on a lawn yesterday, Allison and I, and there was all kinds of rabbit injury. So rabbits, they can be killers of lawns. They feed in the same place over and over. A lot of times they feed at night, and so you don't know you have rabbit problems. But this is what rabbit damage can look like. It kind of looks like disease, but you can find the pellets, the rabbit poop in those spots. What works for these? Sometimes these motion detect sprayer or sprinklers work, but really what works best is fencing. You have to fence the rabbits out. That's what works really well. Then voles, we're seeing the remnants of vole damage in some people's landscapes as the snow goes away. Not a whole lot you can do about that now, except this stuff will grow back. They were feeding on the grass and all that tunneling. But what's probably worse is if you have junipers, a lot of times they cause injury to junipers or roses, other types of shrubs, because they live in those during the winter, and then they girdle the stems looking for water and nutrients, and then you end up with dead parts of your junipers. You can trap these, put little mouse traps in the trails. You don't even have to bait them. This is in the summer. Sometimes you'll have so many voles in your lawn that you'll get the trails in the summer, but they're pretty easy to trap. But here's another little trick that we like to tell people about, and this works for rabbits. It works for voles. Is that this fertilizer called milorganite, and this is an organic fertilizer. Milorganite will repel rabbit feeding significantly. Now you have to keep reapplying it, probably once a month to maybe every other month, depends on how many rabbits you have in your neighborhood and how severe the pressure is. But but this also works for voles, and you can put this in your shrub beds. You can put this in your flower beds. You can put this in your vegetable garden. They don't like the smell of this stuff, and you probably won't like it for about a half a day. You'll smell it when you're applying it. But after that, we don't notice the smell, but the rabbits, the voles, they notice it, and they will go to your neighbors' yards and eat their grass and their veggies and that type of thing. So this is a nice, natural, kind of organic repellent, if you will. Plus, it's a wonderful fertilizer for lawns. Your lawn will respond amazingly to this milorganite fertilizer. So consider using that. I've seen it at Walmart, Ace Hardware, a bunch of places are starting to sell this stuff. So I just want to remind you, we have lots of sources of information in Extension on gardening. We've just go to our Extension, overall CSU Extension website, and then just do a search for Plant Talk or for the Master Gardener information. There's more information than you probably ever want to read there. And then our cohorts blog is a good place to go. And many of you found our talks, our webinars, and they're all posted there. So this video will be posted there after I convert it, and Allison will put it up on our cohorts blog. But then the registration for the future webinars is up there too. So don't forget to look for those in the next few weeks. So that's all I have. There's my information. We can answer some questions as long as people want me to stay here to answer those. Otherwise, you're free to go get your late lunch. So anything burning question-wise, Allison?
Yeah, there's two. So one was wondering if fertilizers would have any effect on her beehives, and if there's anything she should think about.
Okay, so yeah, bees and fertilizers. Here's the thing: is this time of year. So bees are looking for pollen sources, and they'll pick up all kinds of crazy stuff because bees aren't necessarily smart. Sorry to burst your bubble, and I've got bees at my house, so I know. They will go after sawdust and just stuff that is not good for their beehives, but they think it's pollen. They're desperate for pollen this time of year. So here's the thing with fertilizer. If you do fertilize, water it in so that it's not visible on the surface for bees. Other than that, there is no concern about this. And I'm talking just fertilizer. So now if you're doing fertilizer with any kind of pesticide, again, water it in, water it in, water it in. That's the key to being safe with pollinators. Of anything you put on your lawn, water it in so they don't have a chance to harvest it and take it back to their hives. So yeah, it's more of a concern with fertilizer this time of year than other times of the year because they're desperate for pollen sources now. So that would be the main concern. But as far as a toxin or anything, no, unless you're putting an insecticide out. But we don't recommend that. I don't like insecticides on fertilizer. I don't like herbicides on fertilizer except for Crabgrass Preventer. That's okay this time of year, but not the other weed and feeds. Other questions?
Dennis was wondering about controlling goosegrass. Will the Crabgrass ready-to-use products work on goosegrass?
Well, okay. No, the one from Scott's will. Yeah. So goosegrass is a special one, and if you want me to answer that more fully for you, send me an email and just remind me to ask that question. Goosegrass is a tricky one because what works on crabgrass really well doesn't work on goosegrass very well. So send me an email and I will send you, or I'll put it in the email I send out to everyone too. Here's the thing: is goosegrass and crabgrass are almost impossible to tell apart until they get pretty mature. So it is a tricky one. We don't have a lot of goosegrass here, but we get a little, just enough in Fort Collins now that it's kind of becoming a problem. But yeah, I'll put in the email what specifically to use for goosegrass. Yeah, it's a good question.
It is a great question. And then could you just speak briefly about watering in times of drought?
Watering in times of drought. Well, what I would tell people is do whatever your municipality allows you to do. So any water you can put on your lawn is going to be good for the lawn. It's just going to keep crowns hydrated. It's going to keep roots alive. So whatever the frequency, whatever the restriction is, do it. Okay. So that's one thing I would say. Take advantage of it when they say you can water. But then if they say you can't, then don't. Here's the other thing I would say is by taking advantage of those times you can water, it's going to help the trees in your landscape too. When you water your lawn, it's not just the lawn you're watering. It's those trees and, maybe your lilacs or your forsythias, their root systems are in your lawn. You're benefiting those plants as well. So that's all I would say. The other thing I would say, though, is if you are watering restricted, I would do my mowing like the day after you water, so you don't get that wheel tracking on if you happen to mow when the turf is really drought stressed. So that minimizes that potential for all that brown striping and messiness on a drought stressed lawn. So kind of pair your mowing and your watering together.
And maybe the last one, and I've answered this a couple times, but bindweed, controlling bindweed in the lawn.
Okay, so if you have bindweed in your lawn, number one, that's a sign that you might be mowing it too short or you're not fertilizing it enough. Bindweed hates lawn competition in general. And the easiest way to get rid of bindweed is to mow it tall and have it really well fertilized and watered and that kind of thing. But if you still get a little bindweed, those products that have the Crabgrass Preventer on it, those products, I'll go back to this. So the nice thing about the nice thing about the crabgrass preventers or the post-emergent crabgrass control right here, these things, this quinclorac product is great on bindweed. Okay, here's the key though. If you have bindweed in your vegetable garden, your flower bed, do not, not legal, not smart. It's totally stupid. Do not put these in your flower beds. Do not spray these on your driveway if you have bindweed. Do not spray these on anywhere except a lawn. But this quinclorac is dynamite on bindweed growing in lawn. It'll nuke it. Yeah, and interestingly, it'll do crabgrass real well too. Anything else?
There were a lot of questions, so let's see what I could recommend. Just, do you think that right now with the recent snow we had some pretty decent soil moisture? I know it was really dry leading up to that snowstorm, but any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, we got good soil moisture. I mean, it's not going to last forever. That's the problem with the spring around here is that we get some of those snows and then, you turn your irrigation system on, but you really don't turn it on. You say, oh man, it's nice. And then boom, it's 90 and all of a sudden then the lawns get ascochyta. And so that's one disease. And I kind of right here, I knew I wouldn't have time to talk about these. Here's the problem is this disease, ascochyta, blows up this time of year. And when it starts getting hot, that snow we had last week or many days ago, I shoveled for a whole day. It's almost a week and a half now, almost 2 weeks. That water is gone, folks, really. So even though it was great 10 days ago, whenever that snow was, it is pretty much gone already. So don't just think that we had snow in the last couple of weeks and that's enough for your lawn or your trees or anything else in your landscape. Yeah, these next 3 days is going to suck all that moisture out of your landscape because it's going to be bumping 75 for the next 3 days and sunny. It's all going to be gone. Okay, so yeah, it was great, but it's very fleeting. And then, so if you don't start watering, this is the disease. This is what you start to see, this ascochyta leaf blight. So, yeah, very common. We start seeing this in about June, late May, somewhere in there. mid-May, depending on how soon summer comes to us. And it's just because people aren't watering or their heads aren't coming up. So this is where they didn't do the head maintenance and the heads are too low. And so you get this ascochyta disease here, but it's not really a disease, it's a watering problem. So any other questions?
I think we have caught up. So again, I will put Tony's email and phone number in the chat, and you can send him your personal questions there. And again, thanks for joining us today. Next week is Summer Blooming Bulbs. I'll be teaching that one. But remember, we have these presentations through Friday, May 14th, every Friday at noon. So please join us. And thanks again on behalf of CSU Extension, and enjoy your weekend.